Hey, life is really difficult, isn't it? It's one of those things that we always have to manage, the tensions and the issues with life, because even when things are going good, it seems like there's something that gets in the way, and it makes life complicated and difficult. 30 years ago, friends don't remind people, their friends, that 30 years ago, this song, Ironic, came out by Alanis Morissette. And she said these words, "It's like rain on your wedding day," right? It's a free ride when you've already paid. It's the good advice that you just can't take. And what's interesting about this is over the last 30 years, it's been heavily debated that none of these statements and none of the rest of them in the song are actually irony. The only thing that's ironic about the whole song called Ironic is that none of the things that she says are ironic are actually ironic. Like, for instance, rain on your wedding day, that's unfortunate, but that's not irony, right? It's a free ride when you've already paid. That's frustrating for sure, not irony, right? The good advice that you just can't take, that's not irony, that's just stubbornness, right? But it does go to serve the point that life is complicated and difficult, right? Take family situations, family drama, tensions. It's crazy how complex and difficult family stuff can be, isn't it? I mean, it's crazy that you could love someone dearly and then have a 5-minute conversation that makes you want to push them into a lake, right? It's a very complex and difficult relationship. And this time of year, it's made even more difficult because all of the forbidden topics tend to come up around Thanksgiving and Christmas, right? You're not allowed to talk about religion over Thanksgiving, but somebody's going to bring it up. You're not allowed to talk about politics over Christmas, but somebody's going to bring it up. And then there's the dreaded one that nobody wants to talk about how early is too early to put up Christmas decorations. I had to pull my son-in-law aside this past week and say, I'm really sorry that I wasn't able to get this more under control during her childhood, but my daughter put up her Christmas tree on November 1st. It just breaks my heart as a dad. The truth is that there are lots of complexities. And during the holiday seasons especially, it's difficult because we want to be helpful people every day of the year. You want to serve the needs of other people. You don't want people to be hungry. You don't want people to be in need. And it's escalated even more so during the holiday seasons, and even more so right now as our world is going through kind of a difficult time for people in need. And it really becomes difficult because there's a fine line, a complexity, a tension, really, that exists between how much can I help someone without enabling their chaos. I don't want to make it easier for them to be chaotic more, but I also don't want to leave them in need. And it's a constant issue or tension. Think about parenting. Parenting just seems like one dumpster fire after another, doesn't it? I mean, you had high hopes when you had children. That first kid came and you're like, oh, we're going to be awesome at this. We're never going to do this. We're always going to do that. And then you're constantly going back on what you said we'd never do and what we'd always do, right? The only people who say I'll never and I'll always haven't actually had kids yet, have they, right? Because it's constantly frustrating. As a human being, we want to raise emotionally healthy children, but we're emotionally fragile adults. And I don't know about you, but my kids were born naked. They did not come with an instruction manual. Look at all the folds and creases you want, right? Because I'm struggling all of our lives as parents because we want to do what's good and right, but we struggle because we struggle, right? The kids are in the back having a meltdown because somebody spilt their Cheez-Its. We're in the front Googling therapists that take Blue Cross, right? Like, I want to do the right thing. I tell my kids, use your words. And then I just use my words, complete with a hand gesture or two, at the guy who cut me off in the parking lot at Chick-fil-A, right? It's one thing after another. Take bedtime is a constant struggle, isn't it? It makes life difficult. We have pictures in our minds of how we're going to bedtime's going to be a sweet, slow-paced time. We're going to get together and we're going to sing a song. I want to pray sweetly over my child. I want to maybe read them a book or sing a song while they just gently drift into sleep. But most of the time, bedtime is a 43-minute conversation that qualifies you as a hostage negotiator because you have literally just offered everything from a cup of water, a snack, to a pet goat, a trip to Disneyland if they'll just go to bed, right? And then once you finally beat them down, overwhelm their will, and get them into bed and they're asleep, you plop on the couch, exhausted, frustrated, and you feel like a failure as a parent. And then the crazy part happens. 10 minutes later, you start to miss them. What's with that? Life is difficult and tense and complex and hard, and we have constant tensions that are so much greater than just rain on a wedding day, right? So much bigger, and we have to figure out, how do we live in a world that is full of those tensions? And the hardest one is going to face every one of us in the next 8 weeks. The next 8 weeks, almost all of us will face a significant challenge, and it is the challenge all centers around the F word. Now, some of you are like, what did you just say? Did you just say what I think he said? Did he say the F word? I said, yes, the F word. And some of you have been around for the last 8 or 9 weeks at Journey, and you're like, oh, not that again. 8 weeks, you talked about an F word. Finances. We're not talking about that. No, that's not the F word I'm talking about. Every one of us are going to face that one probably in the next 8 weeks or so. But the F word I'm talking about today, it probably will make you wish you were talking about finances, right? The F word I'm talking about today is one that you're probably going, oh, if we're not talking about finances, what F word is he going to talk about? Some of you are probably wondering, do pastors know that there's an F word that we think of when they say that one? You know, and yes, I know. And I'll promise you this, some of you are going to wish I was talking about that F word when I bring up what we are going to talk about. The F word we're talking about is one that isn't a curse word, but probably would be nominated for a curse word by lots of us because it's so difficult. This is the F word that everybody wants to get from people, but nobody wants to give it to other people because we're talking about forgiveness. And forgiveness isn't easy, is it? Forgiveness isn't something that just comes naturally or simple to accomplish or do. It's just complex. We are hurt bitterly, deeply by people, betrayed, hurt in ways that are so just, they're deep rooted in us. And we struggle all the time to deal with forgiveness, right? We have a real life issue. But here's the truth, that forgiving people leads to freedom. Now, some of you would say, oh, I've forgiven them. They hurt me, but I've forgiven them. If we're not experiencing the freedom, then we haven't done the forgiving. Let me say that again, because I know that pushes buttons and it makes you difficult. But if you're like, hey, no, I've forgiven them. If you haven't experienced the freedom, then we haven't done the work of forgiving. And I think most of the time, and by work with people, and here's the deal, in my own work, in my own life, most of the time, it's because I misunderstand what forgiving really means. I either am reluctant to forgive people because I don't understand what it means, because I'm like, I'm not doing that because I don't want to let them off the hook. I don't want to give them a license to hurt me. I don't want to let them walk all over me. I don't want to give them that satisfaction. I have a misunderstanding about what forgiveness is. Or on the other side, I think that I've forgiven people because I misunderstand what forgiving is. You see, we tend to think that forgiveness is like a token. It's a thing that I give a person one time and I go, I forgive you, boom. And they either take it or you do it in your mind, and it doesn't matter, but we tend to think it's a one-time thing. And the reason we haven't experienced the freedom that comes with forgiving is because forgiving is not a one-time thing. It's not something you say. It's not something you do one time. And I hate to say this to us, but there's more work to be done if we want to experience the freedom. Now, if you're okay living in the bitterness, if you're okay living in the anger, if you're okay living in the resentment, if you're okay reliving the pain, and can I just tell you this, holding out on forgiving other people isn't hurting them at all. It's only hurting you. And if you're okay living like that, man, I got to tell you, you're missing out. Because Forgiving people brings freedom to your life. It benefits you and what you're going through doesn't harm or hurt them at all. In fact, I would just tell us that forgiveness really isn't a question that gets to be answered. Did you forgive them? Or didn't you forgive them? It's not really a question to be answered. Forgiveness is a constant tension, isn't it? The pain we've gone through is a constant tension too, isn't it? We experience the pain even after we go through the act of forgiving them one time or 2 times or 20 times for the same thing that they've done. You know, I get a chance in my everyday life to have real conversations with real people about real life. And sometimes people are open and honest. Sometimes people are just sit with me and they pull all gloves off and they just go in and punch heavy. And they explain what they're feeling and thinking. Sometimes, though, people will go through difficult betrayal or pain that they've gone through in the life because of something someone else does. And they'll put up the defenses. So they'll say, well, but it's okay, I've forgiven them. I forgave them a long time ago. But did you? I forgave them. I'm just in this, right? Can I just say this to you? If you're not experiencing the freedom that comes with forgiveness, maybe you just forgave them one time. I'm not saying forgive them over and over and over again for things they keep doing. I'm saying maybe we're carrying the bitterness and the pain from that one time, and we've only forgiven them just that one time, but we keep reliving in the pain. Over the years, I've seen these things play out in people's lives, and I've seen them play out in mine. I say this all the time, but we're not a group of people that used to be people like you, you know? It's not a group of people who put up with or tolerate people like you. It's not a group of people who try to fix people like you or change them. Because me and every other person in this room is just like you. When I say that I've seen these things happen in people's lives, when they say I've forgiven somebody, but they haven't really actually done the forgiving part, it's just been a one-time token they handed out. When I see that, I've seen them in my life. What I mean is I've seen them in my life. Here's a handful of things that I have seen. You might be struggling to forgive if you do this. If you're reliving the offense like a highlight reel. Do that? Find yourself driving down the highway, talking to yourself, rehearsing out that conversation, but this time you've got really good, witty comebacks. This time you win the argument. This time they go, you're right at the end of it. You might really be struggling to forgive. If you're still trying to punish them, even passively. Now, I know you would never do that on purpose, right? But do you find yourself accidentally forgetting to include them in stuff? Or maybe when they walk in the room, you just tend to naturally want to give them the cold shoulder and turn away. You want to ignore them. You want to quietly, you don't really want to do it, but it just naturally happens in you. Maybe we're struggling to forgive if you're still quietly, secretly, even not admitting it to yourself, wanting to punish them. Or maybe you're secretly rooting for them to fail. Now, I know you'd say that you never want anything bad to happen to them. You don't wish ill on them. Those are words we say, right? But there would be a little part of you that was just a little bit happy if you found out their life was falling apart just a little bit. If you're kind of secretly rooting for them to fail, maybe you're not experiencing the freedom that comes with forgiving because we're still struggling through the process of forgiving. Or how about this one? How about you forgive them until you feel the pain again? You go through and you say, man, I forgive them today. And everything's good for a day or two. And then you feel the pain again, and you're right back where you started. Maybe you're struggling. Or here's another one I think of, that you spiritualize your unforgiveness. You say, you know what? I'm just living with healthy boundaries now, and the Lord has just not told me to reconcile with them yet. It's not the difference. Those are all wise things to do. But the problem is sometimes we aren't really walking with God in it. We're not really forgiving them. We're just putting some spiritual branding. It's the same bitterness and resentment. It's the same kind of penalty-giving life, just with a spiritual name badge. And that's the problem that we have sometimes, is that we think that forgiveness is a thing that we do, right? It's a one-time thing, but the reality is that forgiveness isn't a moment. Forgiveness is a muscle. You ever gone to the gym and you went to the gym and you kind of started working out? I told you before, I started working out like a long time ago. I tried it one time. I went to the gym and I thought, you know what I should do? I'm going to start where I left off. I mean, I'm bigger now than I used to be. And I put what I used to bench press on the bar, and I laid out underneath it, and I put it up in the air, and I did great. I brought it down, and that's exactly where it stayed until it almost choked me to death before somebody else noticed, hey, you need a little help, and they came over and went like this and put it back up on the bar for me. You realize that like the one time I lifted that, it was heavy, right? Had I kept lifting it, what would have happened? That same amount of weight would have felt lighter to me, right? If I can't think that working out is a one-time thing, so how can forgiveness be a one-time thing? Forgiveness isn't a moment, it's a muscle that you have to develop. And the first time we do it, it's heavy to lift. And after we learn to keep forgiving every time those things come up, every time we feel that resentment, every time we feel like we want to punish them, every time we rehearse a thing and we get angry again, every time they walk in the room and I cringe, maybe every time I do that, I lift that burden of forgiving and it gets a little lighter. Because it's not a moment, it's a muscle that has to be understood. And forgiveness isn't something we say to people, is it? It's not something we say. Forgiving is something we practice. If we really want to forgive people, and we want the freedom that God that promises us, and we're going to talk about all of those things. If we really want the freedom that we're promised from Jesus, forgiving people, we really want to do that. It's not something we say. It's not something we utter in a prayer. It's not something we kneel at an altar and forgive. It's not something, those are important things. Should you pray about forgiving? Yes, you should. Yeah. Should you give it all to God at all? Yes, you should. Should you submit all those things? But forgiveness isn't just something we say. It's not a token that we give. It's something we practice. And the more we practice it, the easier it gets. And the easier it gets, the more freedom we find. What's crazy about it is that when we talk about freedom, we talk about forgiveness, we talk about all these things, sometimes we misunderstand them, don't we? There's some pretty messed up understanding. We're like, I don't want to forgive them because I don't want to do to them. I don't want to say it's okay. I think it's important to talk about some things that forgiveness isn't. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. There's no such thing as forgive and forget, by the way. Forgive and forget literally doesn't exist. If you can forget something that was done to you, it wasn't that big of a deal. Probably didn't require much forgiving. And if you're struggling to forget stuff and you feel like you're supposed to forget, it's not ever expected of you to forgive and forget. The idea that forgiving and forgetting is something only God can do. He says that if we confess our sins, he'll cleanse us from all unrighteousness. And he will completely do that. Scripture promises us that when we confess our sins to God, he puts our sin as far as the east is from the west. He holds it against us no more. But that's not what we do, right? We can't forget. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, and forgiveness isn't giving someone the approval. It's not you saying, it's okay. How many times I've heard that? People are deeply hurt, betrayed, physically, emotionally, in all kinds of traumatizing ways. And they'll be difficult, struggling through it right in my presence. And say, it's okay. Can I just say this? It's not okay. It's not okay. That what they did is not okay. And can I just say this, give you just a little bit of the freedom that comes with forgiveness? What they did to you is not okay with God either. Betrayal and pain was never God's plan for your life. And saying it's okay just to make yourself feel better keeps you from being able to really understand the full weight of the pain you're in. It's not okay. And forgiving someone doesn't mean saying, hey, what you did to me doesn't matter. And it's not approving it. And here's the important thing: forgiving someone isn't about trusting them. Now, I think we'd all agree that when of all of the people that we know that have ever existed, even if you're here today and the idea of Jesus is not your story, even if you're not a follower of Jesus, my guess is you'd probably agree that Jesus is a pretty good example of a forgiving person, right? I mean, Jesus did unbelievable stuff. He taught about forgiveness in ways that were radical, right? Look at this one. Jesus said, this is Luke chapter 2, he was teaching in the synagogue, and he had just read a part of the gospel, or the prophet Isaiah. And it was a particular part of the prophet Isaiah written hundreds of years before that moment. And he read it all out about the Messiah that was coming. And he told those people in the synagogue that this was fulfilled right here in this moment. And it ticked them off. They didn't like it. In fact, when they heard this, the people in the synagogue were furious. They weren't unhappy. They were furious. Look at this. Jumping up, they mobbed him and forced him to the edge of a hill in which the town was built. They intended to push him over the cliff. They wanted to do harm to him in that moment. But look at what Jesus did. But he passed right through the crowd and went on his way. Now, what do we learn from that, right? What we learn from that is this is the most forgiving person the world has ever known. He teaches radical forgiveness. Forgive those enemies that hurt you, all those things. But he doesn't allow people to hurt him continually. He doesn't put himself in a position because he's so like weak. That's the way we sometimes think about forgiveness, that it's really weakness. But forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength. Look what Jesus does. He's like, you're not going to mistreat me. I'm not going to let myself be put in this place. Forgiveness isn't trusting people who harm us. Even Jesus removes himself from that moment. And he teaches about some pretty radical things in Scripture about things. He doesn't teach that we need to trust them. Look at what Jesus does. Jesus didn't trust them because he knew all about people. People hurt him all the time. People made a significant effort to hurt Jesus on a regular basis. And it says that Jesus didn't trust those people because he knew what was in their hearts. No one needed to tell him about human nature, for he knew what was in each person's heart. And he knew that based on their brokenness, they weren't trustworthy. Sometimes we're reluctant to forgive people because we think that it means trusting them again. But Jesus is the perfect example of forgiving. But he didn't trust people all the time. So forgiveness isn't something that we offer people that somehow approves in what they're doing or means that we have to trust them or put ourselves back in that situation over and over and over again. But freedom is available to us if we could just lean into forgiveness. What's important for us to understand is that forgiving is Christ-like, but boundary setting is Christ-led. It's important for us to know if we're going to really if we're going to forgive someone, that doesn't mean we have to put ourselves back into situations that are consistently harming us. We can instead be led by Christ to set up healthy boundaries. And that might for us be that I'm going to forgive them and I'm going to release them from the penalty of my anger and my resentment. But that doesn't mean I have to put myself back in that situation again and again. It's so important that we recognize and remember that forgiveness isn't a moment. It's not a moment in time. It's a muscle that we build over time. And I know some of you are listening and going, yeah, I really want to be free from the internal conversations about that happen in my anger where I finally win the argument. You're saying, I know you don't want to cringe anymore when they walk in the room. I know you don't want that pit in your stomach when someone brings up their name. I know you want to be free from that. I know that there are people going, man, I just don't know how. Forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a muscle. But there is a moment, isn't there? It's just like lifting weights or working out. We don't go one time and expect to get the full benefit. We go one time, then we go another time, and then we go another time. I think what will happen in your life is we model out or live out the forgiveness that's been shown to us is we forgive people today in a moment. And then maybe it'll go a day or two before we feel that resentment and that anger, that we go through some of those things. And then we forgive them again in that moment. And then maybe after lifting the weight of forgiveness, it becomes easier to do. And maybe the time between the pain comes up less and less often until it's not something that we really live in anymore. Until we no longer cringe when they walk in the room. We no longer try to win an argument in our mind. There's freedom that comes into our life when we forgive, because that's what we've been given. We don't do it out of obligation. We do it out of reflection. The freedom that is offered us isn't setting them free. It sets you and I free. And if you're here today and this maybe is the first time you've really thought about forgiveness, I know you've been carrying a bunch of pain on your own. Maybe today's a great day to begin a freedom relationship with Jesus. Maybe today is a great day for you to recognize, just like I have, that I was created by God and that I walked away, and that the God of heaven loves me so much that he gave his son. And today might be a day where you tell him that you accept the free gift of his forgiveness in your life. And that today I'm going, hey, I want to give my life to you, and I want to take your burden, your life into mine. If that's the case, if that's your story today, I just invite you, would you tell him that? It's a great thing. Just tell Jesus. We call it prayer. It's really just talking to God. Tell him that you believe that you were created by him and that you sinned and walked away and that he loved you, and you accept his payment on your behalf and you want to give him your life. And then I'd love to help you take the next step in that. If you'd let me know about that, you can go to ourjourney.news. You can click on the bottom right corner there has an orange button that says Next Steps. If you'd click on that and let me know we want to begin a relationship with Jesus, I'd love to connect with you and help you take your next step toward Jesus, because forgiving leads to freedom. Forgiving leads to freedom, and it starts with being forgiven.